Welcome back to another edition of the Founder Spotlight. Today I have the founder of a beautiful brand called Magic Cactus, Jonny Locarni. Welcome, Jonny. How are you doing today?
Good, man. Lars, thanks for having me. Excited to get a chat here.
Absolutely. I've been drinking your guys' drinks that you had sent me. I'm a sucker for anything floral, so I've been loving the hibiscus quite a bit. The spiced peach, my wife loved that one. I did as well. So overall, I've just really been enjoying them. So thank you for those.
Of course.
And
Glad you're loving it.
you've had a pretty interesting journey. So let's kind of take it back to the beginning. You grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. How did that environment shape your entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah. Well, I loved growing up in the Midwest, honestly. The Midwest is interesting because the work ethic is something that is kind of unmatched. I think that's always stuck with me throughout my career. It's a very kind of set schedule. I don't know if it's our farm background from our ancestors or what it is, but it's no matter what you're going through, you work hard, and I think that's always kind of stuck with me. Also, I think the value of community and building relationships, just being friendly in general, kind of comes from my Midwest roots. And there's also that aspect of being in these places like LA and whatnot. Being from a place that's not typically associated with, entrepreneurship or things like that, kind of lights a fire to prove yourself. So I think the hybrid of having those experiences both are kind of an advantage that also keeps me humble.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you know or not, but I'm also from the Midwest, from Indiana as well.
Oh, really? You didn't tell me that.
Yeah, I'm from Indiana. So
speaking your language.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up about 30 minutes west of Indianapolis. So
Okay, nice.
Small country town called Danville, Indiana.
That's amazing. Well, that explains your hectic, busy week. You're grinding. I love it.
Exactly. So, as I was doing some research for this, I looked at some of your older interviews and things like that. And you mentioned in some of those that you've had that entrepreneurial itch from a very young age. So I believe you were selling sunglasses on eBay and t-shirts in college. What are some of those biggest lessons that you learned from those early ventures and that you still apply to your businesses today?
Oh, yes. That's hilarious. It's funny to look back on that stuff. I think I guess I learned that the easier something is to start, kind of the harder it is to quote unquote win at that thing or be successful at that thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no defensibility in a t-shirt or hat, which is kind of where, brand comes in, which is a whole side rant, different conversation. But, I think I also learned the difference between what a short-term idea is versus one that has longevity. In college, selling these hats and t-shirts that were, based around tailgate culture and football season, being in Nebraska was a big football culture. That's a pretty short-term idea, or I guess a very seasonal idea, and for college kids. So, but it was great. I mean, you just got to get started on those things when you're that age. If you have that itch, because you just get all of the embarrassing, naive lessons out of the way before you have to do so in your 30s. So I'm thankful for all that. But like I said, it's funny to look back. I think I also learned about myself. I never had that mental blocker to just start something, which I think is sort of a massive obstacle for a lot of people that are much more talented than me, that they kind of are extremely smart, almost so smart that they can never get started because they have that sort of fear of failure, which for better or worse, I never had. Gift and a curse, I guess.
Yes. So did you go to the University of Nebraska?
I did, yes.
Okay, so...
Did you go to Indiana?
I did. So next week, we're not going to be friends anymore, huh?
Oh, man, it's a good thing we got this out of the way this week.
So it's funny you mentioned the getting started portion. That's something that, I struggled with, starting the newsletter and everything like that. And just posting content in general. It's never something that came as supernatural. So, it's definitely a barrier that, I personally have dealt with. So it's awesome that you didn't have that.
Yeah. Anytime you're putting yourself out there in any way, especially on the content side, it's even more difficult. But, it never feels natural at first, It's definitely a learned skill to just kind of put yourself out there, and you might embarrass yourself, but who cares?
Yeah. And we were talking offline. You moved to Arizona about a year and a half, 2 years ago, but moving to LA before that, was a big step in, your career and life. And I think that was the first moment that you took on your first cannabis client. Can you share kind of what led you to dive into the cannabis industry, and obviously, what resonated so deeply that you kind of made it your life?
Yeah. So yeah, I moved to LA right after college. Started as a entry level public accountant, going to companies and doing financial statement work and whatnot. Eventually I found myself in the finance industry. This is back in like 2017 when I was in my career, I was approached by a California cannabis group. So I kind of fell into it by accident. I didn't have any passionate desire to be a part of the cannabis industry at the time. I knew that it was happening and it was this sort of nascent, exciting industry, but I knew nothing about it. And so, when I was approached by that group to do some consulting on the side of my full-time job, I was like, all right, let's do it. And kind of, immediately drawn to the complexities and challenges of the industry. I mean, it felt like sort of the Wild West. Technically, the federal government, you can't deduct any expenses on your tax return as a cannabis company. And so there's all sorts of strategies on how to, stay alive during, compliantly, not breaking the law, but still keeping a business alive. A lot of businesses were losing a ton of money, but on paper, on a tax return, they had to pay tax. So it was just, it's an insane kind of backwards obstacle. But, so that's kind of how I got into it. Those were the early conversations on that whole just financial infrastructure. Before I knew it, just through word of mouth, I had like a handful of these clients, probably 5. And so I took a step back and was kind of like, what just happened? Am I a cannabis consultant now? I don't know when this happened, but it felt like overnight I was just working with these cannabis clients. Eventually after enough time of that, I started to form sort of my own opinions on where the industry was and where I thought it was heading from a more macro perspective. It's kind of interesting because it somewhat ties into what I'm doing now. I always felt that, the newer consumer, because at that point, California was going from medical only to recreational, or what they call adult use. I always felt that the newer consumer, or what they call like the cannabis curious, I guess, was somewhat underserved. I think that, the retail experience of cannabis with the big green neon signs and the, bars on the windows and armed security was just not a very approachable retail experience. That thought is not very innovative now because shortly after you had the MedMens of the world and all these kind of really high-end retail ideas and concepts come to life. But at the time, I told some of these clients that, and they kind of laughed me out of the room saying, like, you don't know what you're talking about, stay in your lane type of response. And I was like, okay, so that marinated for a while and eventually decided to put together our own group, raise a small amount of funding to go pursue some of these competitive licenses with that concept, pitching that concept of this will feel like premium retail that sells cannabis. And so we did that. We won about 1 dispensary license in California that was also a consumption lounge. So one of the first on-premise cannabis consumption licenses in the United States. And then, 3 other dispensary licenses in multiple states. We kind of had this kind of overall umbrella idea of we're going to go, organically win these competitive licenses. Hopefully we're going to have a strong success rate. And then we're going to open up these retail concepts like we pitched. That was all going on track. And then COVID hit in 2020, which was right when everything was kind of about to open and come to fruition. And so I remember, it's funny to look back, I remember being upset that when they said, you can't open for 2 weeks. And we're like, 2 weeks? That's devastating. And then that 2 weeks quickly turned into 8 months. And then, West Hollywood rent is not cheap right there on Santa Monica Boulevard. So eventually we had to kind of, bring on partners and then ended up selling majority a couple of years later. So mostly exited in that business, still have a small ownership stake, but fully exiting eventually. And so, that was kind of eye-opening because I learned a ton really quickly during that time. So, during COVID, I had this kind of personal struggle with my father who was struggling with alcohol, always been a heavy drinker, but it kind of went from functional drinker to a real problem when COVID hit and the world kind of shut down. Mm-hmm. So in the background, trying to figure all that out, was giving him, mocktails and whatnot. And that's when I kind of realized, that's when my, eye for an opportunity in cannabis with that consumption lounge and the dispensaries turned into a real belief and passion, if you will, towards what this, the power of this product.
Yeah, you hit on a few things there. So the Can Curious, I am very comfortable walking into a dispensary, but there's a lot of people that are not. And obviously the dispensaries that are in California are not the experience everywhere else. Probably my favorite dispensary I've ever been into actually was in Palm Springs, California.
Which one?
I forget what it's called, Lighthouse maybe, or
Okay.
that may not be the right name. I can look it up
Okay,
sometime,
yeah, I'm
but
curious.
it was beautiful. I walked in, there was no security guards that I could see anyway. Someone came and like greeted me, a bartender, and I was like, "Hey, can we help you find anything?" They obviously didn't have the actual product sitting out, but they had cans. Can was the only drink there, but they had it sitting out on the shelves, the empty boxes and cans and things like that. And it was a phenomenal experience. It just felt like a normal retail experience.
Exactly.
Point being, most people that aren't into this world don't want to walk into a dispensary. They want to. They're more than willing to try these products. I just had a conversation earlier today where someone was like, he was shocked by how willing everyone is to try these products as a beverage, but they would never walk into a dispensary. So that's why these products notoriously do terribly in dispensary settings.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
a bunch
exactly.
of stoners that want the highest THC product mostly. So you also mentioned, obviously, many of the struggles that go into operating a cannabis company, from not being able to deduct things from your taxes and money and everything like that. Obviously, the patchwork regulations across different states. So obviously, you're operating on the hemp side of things now, but can you tell us some of the biggest obstacles you faced with Magic Cactus and how you managed to kind of push through those barriers?
Yeah, yeah, really good question. So the obstacles around Magic Cactus are obviously, the regulatory environment. While I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity that hemp brings versus cannabis, especially in
Mhm.
beverage, a heavy product to distribute, if you can't go across state lines, it's really not a sustainable business. So on the one hand, I'm very grateful, but the obstacles still are the same. I mean, you're seeing what happens in California with these emergency regulations. Even those who were completely finger on the pulse, very in tune with the conversation, were not able to predict that. They had a bill before that was killed, and then these emergency regulations were just fired up. So things like that kind of make a lot of people afraid. And when I say people, I mean, when we talk to retailers, for example, even outside of California, a state that's super hemp friendly, some of them are just hesitant to get started. And when we talk about investors, a lot of these early brands like us raising money, that's always a tough conversation as well. Is like, well, what happens if this farm bill goes the wrong direction on the federal level? What happens if other states follow suit to what California is doing? It's kind of this what if conversation, and I think our entire industry is just desperate for some black and white infrastructure. We're all happy to pay reasonable tax. We're happy to be a real industry, and I think this unique middle ground of gray area right now that we're in is almost makes things more difficult because we just don't know where it's going. So brands like us who are super low dose and could fit well into like a Whole Foods, for example, that conversation's just on hold until the regulations are black and white. So none of these larger players on the retail side or on the fundraising side, well, for the most part, that kind of varies, but especially on the retail side and distribution, a lot of people aren't comfortable, and I'm not even positive if we're comfortable. If we were to go, do a nationwide launch with a retailer, who knows if 2 months later we'd have to pull a lot of that product out of certain states and whatnot. So it's real. This regulatory kind of middle ground is definitely the largest obstacle.
Yeah. Obviously, you mentioned California there, but I think I'd seen that Erewhon was selling some of these beverages. Were you ever in conversations? I feel like Magic Cactus would do really well in Erewhon. I feel
Yeah.
like I've never personally been in one, but from what I hear, I think you guys have that luxury premium vibe to you, so I think it would probably do well. Were you ever in conversations there?
Yeah, and I'll just say this: that the timing of the conversations couldn't have been more ironic. First being AB 2223, and then our final conversations being right before emergency regulations. We didn't end up launching with Erewhon, and so that was again devastating, right? We had this whole thing kind of planned on how we wanted to approach that partnership and try to get in with them, and that was killed by a surprise regulation. And you never know. Even this, like some of the states in the South now, and Massachusetts took a similar approach. And then some are just unspoken, so you don't know what's going to happen. So it's really tough on the retail side. We're about 85% direct to consumer, essentially for that reason. We do want to step on the gas a little bit on the retail side, but carefully. We just don't want to overextend and make the wrong play to where that could backfire, like what happened in California.
So Magic Cactus, I believe, commits about 10% of profits to organizations addressing
Yeah.
alcohol abuse. So how have you seen, this aspect of the business making a difference? And, you kind of touched on this a little bit of why that's probably important to you, but, why was this important for you to integrate from day one?
Yeah. Yeah. So first I'll say that, the committing 10% of our profits to the organizations, addressing alcohol and substance abuse was a non-negotiable for me, just because of what I just said about my backstory. I think that, while on the surface, the mission of Magic Cactus is really about simply providing a healthier option for people to unwind, or a healthier drinking experience for people to connect. But on the back end, the reason for this brand's existence is much deeper than that. There's significant issues with substance abuse throughout the world, really, but really, deeply in our country. We're super pharmaceutical heavy, alcohol and drugs like Xanax and other prescription drugs just being part of the norm in our society. And so, we wanted to make sure that, or I guess I wanted to make sure that no matter what happens with this brand or company or in the future, from day one, the reason for this brand's existence is rooted in our ability to make an impact. So if this, if Magic Cactus becomes a massive brand, I want to make sure that we're making a massive impact on the issues that we care about most and why it exists.
I love that. So another challenge that you've discussed overcoming is stereotypes around cannabis, especially with edibles and beverages. So how are you working to educate consumers and change the perception of these products, and how does that align with your brand's ethos?
Yeah, it's always funny because everyone's, a lot of people are familiar with this at this point, but especially when we first launch, and when we were formulating, pre-launch, pitching a microdosed THC beverage, no one really understood what that meant. Everyone's like, oh no, I had a gummy 5 years ago and I hated it. I'm never touching THC again. And you are too. We're so deep in this industry and space, and our community, the way we speak is as well, that we forget sometimes that there are a lot of people who are, not up to speed with what is possible with a THC product. We actually learned that a lot when we sponsored a music festival on the East Coast in August called Elements Music Festival. Kind of middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. It drew crowds from New York and whatnot as well. But there was a lot of people that are, from the, small town East Coast, and saying, this is a microdosed THC beverage. And they were kind of like, what? A microdosed THC beverage? Like they had never even come across, I don't know how, but they had never even come across that concept. And so it was cool to see them kind of be won over. But, there's still a lot of people out there that are at first glance, first impression, it's just a no for them on anything that has THC involved. So, I think education is a huge piece for this entire industry, and why it's kind of a unique competitive landscape, because we're not really competing with one another per se. It's kind of an all ships rise together industry where if you learn about another beverage that's less than 5 milligrams and you try it and it's not us, we're pumped, because then, if you liked it, now your fridge space is open for opportunity, because you're not going to stick with just one brand for the rest of your life. I think we're all kind of trying to do our best to educate that. And I think you can kind of feel it coming around a little bit, even versus 6 months ago, 12 months ago, in a completely different landscape than like 2 years ago. And so it's interesting. So we're really trying to make sure we're finding the right channels too.
Mm-hmm.
Us being in that 2 milligram space, we don't do great in, smoke shops, CBD shops, dispensary-ish verticals. And so, and I think that's because those customers, they know what they're doing. They know what they're looking for. They want potency. They want intoxication. And so, a premium microdose beverage isn't the most attractive option to them. But in grocery and liquor stores, things like that, we do really well. And so educating and having ambassadors on site doing tastings and being able to talk through the product so they know that this is not a scary traditional THC experience. This is an approachable, drinkable product.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into my next question here is that do you guys have any plans to launch like a 5 milligram?
That is such a good question. I think not anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
We are big fans of kind of keeping the main thing, and not chasing shiny objects per se. In my opinion, obviously we're trying to listen to our customers and really kind of send out surveys to really understand what their desire is. But But in my opinion, there's so many products out there, right? And there's going to continue to be more in the next few months and next years to come. I think if you want a 5 milligram product, you have a ton of options. both at the dispensary and in the hemp space. I think being a lot of our reviews, if you look on our website, just our customer reviews, a lot of the things that people like the most are that they don't feel overwhelmed from having a couple of them. So I think, we want to stay true to that and not have a confusing product offering to customers where, this color is 5 milligrams, this one's 10, this one's 2. Which one am I drinking? We like the idea of, for our brand, if you come up to a Magic Cactus and you drink one, you know exactly what you're getting every time.
Yep.
I think
That's fair.
we'd be quicker to offer an alternative that was, less intoxicating than more intoxicating, because everyone has highlighted what they like about the product most is that it is approachable and anxiety free.
Yeah. I struggle with this because, the sales data says, especially in Minnesota at least, that the 10 milligrams, fly off the shelves, and everything below that doesn't.
Of course,
really.
Yeah, and it's hard not to be persuaded by that.
Exactly. But like for myself as a consumer, and what I would like to consider a pretty sophisticated one, I find myself in the middle of the week reaching for the 2 milligrams. I've purchased the 1 milligram low boys from Can before, and 5 milligram ones. I very rarely am going to grab a 10 milligram because I love beverages. As my wife and my coworkers here, I pretty much always have some sort of beverage near me, and I don't want to drink a 10 milligram because I'm probably only going to have one and going to feel it pretty heavy, and I want to drink 2 or 3 of these. So generally, I try to go for those lower dose ones. So
yeah.
I feel like
if you want to go to
your target demo.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to, I just feel like if you want that kind of intoxication right away, like what you'd get from a 10 milligram single beverage, at that point, you might as well just have a gummy or something, a different delivery method, because if you're looking for that as quick as possible, there's other options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the exception is, those who do have extremely high tolerances, and a 10 milligram beverage is just a light buzz for them, like it is for us. That's always a question, but I just think that they're being served by a lot of brands already, and there's not, we're in no rush to step in and try to just be another one of those products.
Yeah, that's fair. So last question for you. I always like to ask founders, besides your own product, what other brands are you drinking, or what other brands inspire you?
Yeah. Other brands I'm drinking or inspire. I mean, the other brands I'm drinking, I really like Hi-O. It's not even in our space, but I like Hi-O. I think they've made a delicious beverage. If I'm looking to truly kind of wind down, then I'm probably grabbing a Magic Cactus. But as far as like having, instead of like a LaCroix or kind of a more plain sparkling water, I really like the taste of Hi-O and the ingredients that are in it. This is going to be cliche of what has inspired me lately, but I can't help but think about Liquid Death, who just kind of came in and at the biggest level innovated around an old kind of outdated category of water where there wasn't much innovation. I love what they did. I'm a big believer in brand, and I'm always kind of having these, especially when I come across my performance marketing friends, I'm always arguing with them about what matters more, brand or performance in the long run. And so I love that Liquid Death kind of proves that how powerful brand can be. So I'm a big fan of their play. People who say they don't understand it, I'm just like, you got to understand it. It's such an interesting case study. But yeah, I love I like what other? I'm trying to think of hemp brands so I can give some people some credit here. I love the taste of Can. I haven't had it in a while, but I like the taste of their product. What else do I like? I like the branding of Louie Louie. I still got to taste their product. I don't know if you've talked to them yet, but I met those guys at BevNet last year, and I love how their branding looks. I've been meaning to order some. I got to taste it, but yeah, there's a lot of cool ones. I mean, a lot of these breweries are doing these one-off, kind of treating it like craft beer and whatnot, which is cool to see.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the craft beer, non-alcoholic infused blow up, essentially, because I feel like it's
right.
I've had one, and it actually was probably the best non-alcoholic beer, regardless, that I've had. It was
remember
Witch Doctor IPA. I believe the drinkable company owns them or something. I'm not sure. It's hard to keep up with all the brands inside the drinkable company, but it was really good. The IPA was phenomenal. I think they had like 5 or 6 different types of hops in there. Phenomenal. And then there happened to be THC.
Yeah, that's sweet. I know, right? There should be a big blow up of that.
I've heard that it's really hard to make, is what I've heard, and why that hasn't blown up yet.
Yeah, you got to have Athletic Brewing on here and talk to them about it, because that's probably my favorite non-alcoholic beer I've tried. I'm not like a huge non-alcoholic beer connoisseur by any means, so take that with a grain of salt. But I think they nailed the liquid in the can, which is, I've had some ones that weren't as good a lot of times, and that they really nailed it.
I agree. I think their limited runs that they do on their website, or just their website exclusive ones, are absolutely phenomenal. I think you could put that up there with probably pretty much any other beer, regular or non-alcoholic, and they would compete. Their core lineup is very good. I don't have anything negative to say about the flavor or anything. I think their price, they're a startup, so I get it. But I think they're priced a little high for their core lineup comparatively, because I think there's some other products that get sold in like Whole Foods or wherever that are similar in taste, maybe not quite as good, but they're like $3 cheaper per 6-pack, which adds up.
Nice.
Anyway, I love athletics, so nothing discouraging.
Yeah. Okay, good. I gotta check out this website exclusive drop. I haven't even seen that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, usually I think they have like 4 to 6 website exclusive ones. So like they're like seasonal. Sometimes they do like experimental ones and things like that. So
I love that.
Yeah, they have a club basically. So I forget how much. It was cheap. It was like, I don't know, $27 a year or something like that, and it lowers the price per 6-pack. I think from like 16 down to like 12 or something like that.
Oh wow!
And
nice.
And then if you order $50, you get free shipping, and then they send you a cup as well. So basically, I was like, okay, if I sign up for this, I just need to order like twice, and I've paid off the cost of the club. So anyway,
100%. That's a great offer. I gotta text you offline and figure out what your favorite flavor is. So I'm gonna order some off that. That sounds awesome. I didn't know they had like these exclusive flavors online. I just been trying them where I see it.
Yeah. I really like the Oktoberfest. I ordered a bunch of that. But I am a sucker for everything fall. So I don't care what it is: pumpkin, cinnamon.
You and
apple.
me both, man. You and me both. Guilty pleasure, a pumpkin spice latte.
I had one earlier this morning, actually. Not from Starbucks though. Local. Shop local.
There you go. Those are the best. Yeah, that sounds amazing right now. I haven't had one this year yet.
That's usually, I don't drink a lot of flavored coffees, but that's usually the only one I have. I'll have like 1 or 2 a year, and it's almost always pumpkin.
It's the exception. I'm the same way. I drink black cold brew, and then I switch to pumpkin spice latte. It's such an opposite end of the spectrum, but I love them.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jonny. And until next time, guys, cheers.
Thanks, Lars. You have a good one.